Good evening. Welcome to the July 12th, 2023 meeting of the Town of Southampton Conservation Board. In accordance with the Town Board's adoption of Local Law Number 14 of 2022, the Board's meetings are being held both in person at Town Hall and via video conference through Zoom webinar. The link to participate in this meeting via video conference can be found on the town's website and the town clerk's agendas and meetings portal. You can also watch the live stream video and submit written comments for the record, for the public record through the town website. If you are attending via Zoom and wish to speak during this meeting, then please click the raise hand icon. As a reminder to all applicants, agents, and members of the public who wish to speak at the meeting, please state your name and Hamilton residence for the record. Thank you. Now, please join together as we salute the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What is your pleasure on the minutes of June 28th, 2023?
Motion to accept as written or amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain, you have to vote there.
Okay.
So we have
4 ayes and 1 abstention. Public hearings, A 022054, Paul Mazak and Lisa Gallo, and the applicant requested adjournment to September 13th, 2023. Is there anyone in the public who would like to speak to this application?
Motion to adjourn until September 13th?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023008, Michael Sonnenfeld.
Good evening.
You can share this one.
Hello, Daphne Vaughn, Surfside Environmental Planning, here for the owner, Michael Sonnenfeld. So this is a continuation from May 24th of hearing where the project is for demolition of an existing two-story residence and reconstruction of a new two-story residence. All of the construction portions of the project will meet the recommended 100-foot setbacks from the wetlands. We are proposing a 75-foot naturally vegetated non-disturbance, non-fertilization buffer in keeping with the 2017 prior approval on the property, save for an issue that we wanted to discuss at the last meeting, which we did discuss at length, with regard to protection of the property on the perimeter of Ocean Roads and Mecox Road for this corner lot, for protection of the pond and overall property from for privacy and prevention of deer and with maintenance of a fence line on those lot lines. We discussed a psychological deer barrier, and the board had asked us to do a little bit more research on that. The plan before you was submitted yesterday, which I apologize for the late submission of that. We had some issues with the landscape architect's computer system. So we did do some additional research, and I believe the issue that we were mainly discussing was raising the height of the fences above grade to allow for continued passage of small animals. and for the prevention of the deer. The thought process being that we would have a wire fence on the actual property line with a native hedge right behind it, and then 5 feet behind that, an opaque fence, because deer don't like to jump things that they can't see the other side of. At least that's what research shows. So that fence, 5 feet in, would be a 6-foot-high wood or opaque form of fence. Both fences would be elevated about 6 to 8 inches above grade continuously along the perimeters of the property lines up to the driveway to allow for the continued passage of small animals. Now, we did go over at the last hearing that this is a dug pond that was created back in the 80s and became this whole natural wetland that is shown at present. We are proposing to do native plantings here along the slope between the proposed development and the wetland edge of the pond to the 75-foot mark in the most important part of the property. The remainder of the property contains natural vegetation surrounding the pond that would remain. The privet that is existing would be removed. Right now, the fence line is about 15 feet into the property on Ocean Road, and that would be removed and relocated to the true Ocean Road property line on the eastern side. And what else is there? And the native hedge would be bayberry and winterberry. So the purpose for the retention of the fence would be for deterring the passage of the deer into the property, to, destroy the native landscape, the landscape of not only this property, but the other properties owned by Mr. Sonnenfeld and his family, as there is extensive landscaping that is maintained on the properties. Also, to deter pedestrians and vehicles from entering the property from this very busy corner lot that is, a back roads thoroughfare here in Bridgehampton. There's concern, that without the fences here, if a car veers into here, that it may enter the pond, and he doesn't want to have that potential liability issue. So for safety concerns, and lastly, just for the security of the owner, so he can continue to have the quiet enjoyment of the property without any fence lines impeding his enjoyment of the pond. So the planting plan itself is the same as it was previously for the buffer. We did include on the second page that cross-section that the board was looking for. So it does show the detail of the two fences with the hedge and the raising of the lower portions continuously. And we say 6 to 8 inches depending upon the grade. We think 6 inches is probably sufficient. But it, maybe in some locations it may be a little bit higher. Obviously, grades change, so 6 inches would be the minimum.
Daphne, I have a question. On those fences, the 6-foot height, would that be in addition to the opening in the bottom, or would that be the total height?
I think it would have to be the total height of the fence line, per the building department's code, because you technically.
And the same with the 4-foot?
Yeah.
Okay.
think that's really all that I have, unless anyone has any questions.
I have a quick question, Daphne.
Yes.
On the left side of this survey, I see a new 8-inch tall electric fence to be installed.
Oh, 8 foot.
Is that a gate or
Yeah,
is?
this is a gate,
Okay,
yeah. And that was part of the plan originally.
Okay.
So there's no change there either.
okay.
And that's customary per the town code. You're allowed to have a gate of 8 feet, but fences are not allowed to be 8 feet.
Thank you.
Teresa Mason from the Environment Division. A couple of things with respect to the proposed project plans. We don't have a problem with the house. The house and the accessory structures meet the required setbacks. We had recommended waiving of the public hearing for the application, subject to removing the fences from within the buffer. The past board actions has never granted approval of a fence in a buffer less than 5 feet from a wetlands boundary, which it would be here in this northerly corner. Also, section 330-109 of the town code, which governs fences, does not permit 6-foot fences in the front yard. And this property has 2 front yards, here along Mecox Road and along Ocean Road as well. Part of that is because of line of sight. When you get to this corner, there is a vision problem and you don't know if you're going to have safe turning access off of the road. So that is one of the major issues why they don't allow 6-foot fences in a front yard. Second of all, the setback requirement, I believe, is going to be 30 to 70 feet. I'd have to double check the code requirements. And based on my knowledge of the zoning board applications that have come through the town has never granted a variance for a 6-foot fence in the front yard of this length. Maybe a small section they have granted, but my understanding is that they have never granted a total of 6 foot high for the entire perimeter of the property. So I think on this road, never proceeded this way. Beyond the code requirements of the town building and zoning code and the safety issues here for line of sight, so you have safe passage when you're turning on the road, you have the wetland standards that say you have to protect the values of the wetlands, and one of those values is movement for animals and habitat for animals. It doesn't exclude deer. The code doesn't exclude deer. It says wildlife. Deer are wildlife. And I understand that Mr. Sonnenfeld wants his privacy, but you have hundreds of feet of natural vegetation to screen from Ocean Road. And you're set back here from Mecox Road in accordance with the requirements. And yes, if he wants to have, access to the wetlands, we're not preventing him from doing that. There are other ways to, to have access to the wetlands and to the buffer and to enjoy that area without having to fence off the whole area and prevent wildlife and the other values that wetlands provide from accessing this area. So, again, we don't have a problem with the actual main portion of the development. It's the fences, because the fences are not consistent with the wetland permitting issuance standards. Do you have any questions for me?
Are the fences in the buffer, what's already the buffer right now?
Yes, correct. The buffer extends to the property lines.
And the other thing I want to bring up is that the roads there do fragment, do divide the habitat. So it's not just a fence, but you have 2 roads that are also doing the same thing.
I don't disagree, but when you add fences and a deer can't get into the wooded vegetation, where are they going to walk, right? They're going to walk along the road, and that pushes them into the road, and there's more likely to be deer accidents happening because they're not being able to walk through the woodlands, right?
Right, and also we're overpopulated by them.
Well, yes, overpopulation is an issue, right? However, part of the issue is loss of access to habitat. when people put up these fences, where else are they going to go? And they're gonna congregate in those few areas that are left to them. And that makes, breeding easier. It increases impacts to other people. If you exclude them from this property, that pushes on the neighbors, and that pushes onto these other properties, and that's not fair either.
Well, I won't go there.
Teresa, can you speak to the existing deer fences?
Again, deer fences are prohibited in the town code. Fences of 6 feet are the maximum allowed, with the exception of agricultural uses. And there has to be an active agricultural use, like Mr. Ludlow's farm, he's allowed to have an agricultural fence, but that's not allowed on residential properties.
So the existing deer fence that surrounds the entire property is not?
Unauthorized, correct. And part of the previous permit for this property was to remove the fences from within the buffer. And that was the mitigation that the Conservation Board had required as part of that application.
Thank you.
Yes, Daphne Vaughn. So we did acknowledge that Mr. Sonnenfeld is aware that his existing deer fences are illegal, and this is why we've tried to come up with an alternative to his existing issue. We also did state in, at the last meeting and also in my letter of submission with these current plans, that part of what we would like to do is remove this 5-foot swath from the buffer, so it's not actually part of the covenanted area and would be, actually separated from the buffer, because it's the property line essentially, and 5 feet beyond that. The hedge would be native, so it would essentially be like part of the buffer, but not legally part of the buffer. These remaining areas would all be covenanted as buffer. The covenant that is existing on the property was for the prior project and would need to be changed to reflect this project, which is different in the scope of work. Not tremendously, except for this fence. There is changes to the scope of the house. Sanitary is an IA system versus last time it was just a standard sanitary system. So the project is not identical. The covenant is not reflective of exactly what would be happening now. Also, with regard to the fence code, there's a couple different sections of the zoning code that refer to fences. One is section 330-109, which does speak to corner lots and does actually allow a 6-foot fence on a corner lot as long as it's inset by 5 feet. I have been trying multiple times to get in touch with the chief building inspector, both by phone and by email, with regard to what would actually be legal for placement of a 6-foot fence on the property. Because it really depends upon the way that yards are designated here, and that's not 100% clear. So, and that's an issue that we could certainly address with the building department, and if it requires a variance, we are absolutely willing to have that discussion with the Zoning Board of Appeals. We do have to go to them anyway because of the change to the project, which did receive a variance for setbacks. So we will be going to the ZBA regardless, and if this is just an addition to variances that we need to request, we have no issue with having that discussion, granted if this board is willing to give us approval of this proposal. So otherwise, the other portion of the zoning code is 330, ooh. 103, corner clearance, which I've been dealing with recently a few times. on smaller properties where you're supposed to take a 50-foot radius from the corner of the property and kind of cut a triangle, which would not be ideal for our proposal here. I will say we can certainly appeal to the zoning board on that. I have just done that on a much smaller property for a shorter fence, and I did get that variance. The interesting thing about this property is that there is this very large shoulder that exists between the property line and the road. We did actually have correspondence with Sean McDermott with regard to that to get clarification as to how we could calculate that, because the code is not 100% clear on that. Because it says it's supposed to be taken from the center line of the roads. So we had thought that you could do it from, here and here, versus he wants it from the actual point of the property line taken 50 feet out, and then a radius that would cut across here. But if it was taken from the true center line of where the roads intersect, it would really almost not impact the actual property. So the true sight lines of the road are really not impacted at all. But again, that is not an issue for Chapter 325, which is what this board is charged with.
The corner clearance, Martha Riker, Toomey Latham Shea, Kelly Dubin, and Corderaro, Riverhead, New York, for the applicant Michael Sonnenfeld. I wanted to address one more thing about the corner clearance regulation in section 330-103. It's not only a prohibition on fences, it's actually also a prohibition on all vegetation higher than 2 feet. So we feel that when we go for a variance anyway from section 330-103, there is also an environmental benefit here, because essentially if we were to comply strictly with the corner clearance, it means that we would be clearing this entire area of the buffer to maintain it less than 2 feet tall. The only exception is that trees can be trimmed up to a height of, you have to remove all the tree limb vegetation to a height of 10 feet. So that's another consideration. It's not simply just about having a fence line. There is also an issue with clearing vegetation that would be in this covenanted buffer.
So we have a decision to make. I look at this as, and I recognize Teresa's comments, I recognize the applicant's comments, also recognize that that there has been for some time now a lot of discussion in the town about a problem with the population of the deer and the damage they do on the various properties. And it does not appear there's a clear program at any level to address that. And at the same time, the problem appears to be getting worse. Typically, a healthy deer, where there's adequate food, will typically give birth to twins. Occasional singles, but mostly twins. You can do the math. If you double the population every year, that can get pretty scary pretty quick. And there is very limited hunting in this area, and there are no natural predators. That does not help the cause for the applicant or any of the neighbors. I look at this as something outside the box that we usually operate in. We don't usually allow fences right on the edge of the buffer, well, in the buffer, but they're going to put it to the edge of the buffer. So we would need to change, they would need to apply to change the covenanted description for the buffer, which they've indicated in their exciting. I would like to see this as a pilot program of sorts. I think we should pay attention to this, to test various aspects of it, see how it fits in the neighborhood, see if it is effective for Michael Sonnenfeld and his family, see if there are any unforeseen consequences, and not be of the mindset that we're making a change and wholeheartedly every application comes through now is gonna get treatment just like this. We should pay attention to every application on its own merits, but this really should, I think there's gonna be a time when there's gonna be a straw that breaks the camel's back. And we need to be prepared to be part of the solution. And this is an opportunity where the applicant is willing to do something different that the research has indicated should be effective. It's very visible in that it's right in the corner. It's also near where I live, so I can pay attention to it as well. At least it's handy for me. I don't think we know all the consequences of approving a fence like this. But I think that we can do it one time and pay attention to it and see if it's something that we might want to do again. I do recognize that deer can make a big change in the habitat on a property with their browsing, and particularly when the numbers are large. So those are my thoughts, and I'd be interested to hear others.
Has this system been instituted anywhere else where, you know, has proven or disproven its ability to keep the deer out?
I would refer to the applicant for that. I will say that I've heard of the concept for quite some time. The concept that they spoke about having to do with deer preferences. Deer don't like to jump where they can't see where they're gonna land. Deer have poor depth perception, so a space between two fences is not encouraging to the deer. What typically happens with deer is if the population and the pressure gets too great, then some of those systems fail. The applicant began with a description of the fence as an emotional barrier. The deer fence that Teresa referred to on our property is a physical barrier. The difference is that, now occasionally a deer can jump an 8-foot fence, but most deer cannot. So that is a barrier that stops the deer from jumping through. The deer could get a running start and jump this, but they don't usually because they have these aversions to depth perception, to not seeing where they're gonna land. So that's why it's considered an emotional barrier, because they physically have the capability of jumping it, but they don't. Perhaps have you heard of applicants, have you heard of anybody doing this successfully?
Well, I think I mentioned that my son put up an emotional fence, and so far it's worked. There was one section where it was not in place. That was the only place the deer came through until they repaired it. Now, I think you're right, we don't know the consequences if the population keeps on expanding and they're desperate for food. Things may change. So I think that, I think it's worth trying it as a pilot program. Also, what they're doing is, and my son doesn't have that, where the animals can get through, you know, at the bottom. Here, we're letting other animals get through, and I think before it was, maybe it wouldn't be through, you know, along the whole expanse of the fence, but just that there would be every so many inches an opening. I think that's important, so that other animals can go, you know, go back and forth. But of course, they're going out to the street, which is another barrier.
Yeah.
Teresa Mason again. You know, numerous wildlife studies indicate that population growth in any animal is always cyclical. So we may be in a period of expanding population for deer. And, you know, that coupled with loss of their existing habitat is making a problem. I acknowledge that. However, again, every population study of any species, you will see a cyclical downturn at some point of that. So that's just one thing. It's not going to be a continual problem forever and ever. At some point, the population will start to decline.
Have you seen any study of that being true with white-tailed deer?
I haven't seen it specifically for white-tailed deer, but I haven't looked for one. I could look for one if you would like.
Yeah, I'm not sure that is true for white-tailed deer.
Almost every other species that I have seen, you have a cyclical downturn when the population can't sustain itself, when there's not enough food, when they've lost too much habitat. At some point, the population is going to go down because it just physically cannot be sustained.
You know, all those
Right.
things are present in North Haven, and it didn't diminish the population.
I'd be happy to look for some studies for you. That being said, you know, you did indicate that there is an emotional barrier and an aversion to jumping these fences. However, what happens when a deer is spooked, right? It's gonna go. It's gonna go to the nearest vegetation it's gonna see. It's going to try and escape for whatever is spooking them. And it may run up into that fence. It may hurt itself. It may trap itself. We have seen in some places where there have been illegal double fences where fawns have been trapped between the fences. Animals have been impaled on some of the fence lines, on the secondary fence line, because they were spooked. They had nowhere to go. And when you have a busy road, that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen when there's deer present in the area and there's a busy road and there's no place for them to go and they can't get to the place where it's safest for them. So, you know, I understand that, you know, there's some concern about the vegetation and enjoying privacy, but that's why we have these wetland buffers, is to provide habitat for these animals where they have nowhere else to go. And that's what one of the permit issuance standards is to protect wildlife habitat. It doesn't exclude deer. There is nothing that excludes deer. It says wildlife, and deer are wildlife. Any questions?
I think we can protect the habitat. And there is a lot of research that shows excluding deer also protects the habitat because it protects the foliage.
If we allow this as a pilot program, it'd be interesting to see how it works. But I'm afraid of other applicants coming in and jumping on the bandwagon with that. So if we can specify that this is a special exemption or for this method, I think it'd be fine. I'd like to see how it works, honestly.
I've been trying to think of how we can quantify to look at data that's meaningful for the benefit of our board to determining if, say, in 5 years looking back, if we can say, yeah, that was a wise decision or not. Any thoughts?
Couple thoughts. Martha Reichert again for the applicant. You know, one of the things that I've spent some time thinking about over the course of this application is always, I know, a concern for this board, which is what is the potential precedential effect of allowing this to happen? And while there are a couple examples throughout the town, in general, it is very rare to have a pond on a corner lot in the front yard, right? So I think that automatically this very specific set of circumstances and the fact pattern that you have here limits the precedential value. That being said, this board has always said time and time again that every property is unique and that there is no precedential value, right? So it's something that this board balances whenever they look at any application. So, you know, I do believe this property presents a very unique set of circumstances. I also think that, you know, so should a future person say, well, you know, at 1135 Mecox, you allowed fence here, you know, I don't know if they were dealing with a water body of this size that prevents the safety issues. If it is a road that's as heavily trafficked as Ocean and Mecox Road are, right? I mean, there are definitely things happening here where you have two very major heavily trafficked roads, and I think any of the board members who went and visited this property saw just how busy those roads are, especially now in the summertime. So I think that, again, the size of the water body, the uniqueness of how close it is, you know, and some of its history, right, in terms of it having been a dug pond, make it a very unique set of circumstances that I believe limits any precedential value. In terms of monitoring, you know, I guess in order to develop a monitoring plan or, you know, some sort of pilot program, you have to sort of look at what you're trying to quantify, right? And is the concern about whether or not animals are able to make passage through the opening at the bottom, or is it about injury to deer? I mean, what exactly would the board want to study? Or, you know, in terms of what you were talking about in terms of quantifiable?
I'm thinking all of the above. I personally don't think a deer is gonna go through a 6 to 8 inch opening. I haven't seen that before. I don't think what you're applying for is not a fence that has a tendency to impale a deer. But suppose there's regular deer caught in between the fences that causes problems. I'd like to know about that.
Sure.
If I'm actually wrong and the deer do get under a 6 to 8 inch opening, I'd like to know about that. If in fact this whole emotional barrier doesn't work and the deer frequent on a regular basis, I'd like to know about that. So those are the three things that I'm interested in. And I don't know how we can quantify that, but if the applicant simply keeps a record, that could be helpful.
Okay.
Could we do monitoring ourselves if we were in the area, just to look and see if there's any animals that are caught in between, if we're in that area? You know, would they give us permission to just take a look and see what's going on there?
We'd have to talk to our client about it, but I mean, I think that most of what you would be observing is from the street. But I know that, you know, in certain other projects that have gone through either the Conservation or the Environment Division, you know, there are sort of, you know, regular reports that are done. So, I mean, I think those are all things that we could bring to our client. You know, Jerry, I just don't know what you have in mind in terms of
I
sort of
had
ongoing,
wanted,
yeah.
you know, if we're in the air, I'm not saying that there's gonna be a scheduled, you know, inspection. I'm saying if in the area, for our own knowledge, walk that corner and just observe. Is there any hair on the fence? You know, are there any deer trapped in between? You know, look for signs that,
It's gonna be public property on the outside.
on the outside, yeah, I'm
Right.
talking about the outside.
And that's where you can observe it. You can't see it, observe it from the inside because of the
No.
opaque fence. So, yeah, but that's public property. We don't need permission from that. That's just.
Right, that's what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
outside, not inside.
I mean, that's totally fine, right? That doesn't require any permission from the owner if you want to walk around the perimeter and see that. You know, I think we're definitely open to this idea of seeing how this fence works and if it accomplishes the board's goals and our own.
Is the wire fence just to protect the hedge from being eaten? Because you can see you can see through the wire fence, so it's really not opaque on both sides.
You can see through the wire fence. The wire fence is there to provide the adequate amount of sunlight so that the plants can grow, right? If we had to, you know, you're allowed to have a 4-foot fence right on your property line in front yards. But from a sort of, you know, ecological standpoint, for these plants to flourish and to grow, they're gonna need a certain amount of sunlight. There's already some trees, right, that provide shade, so that's really the purpose of the wire fencing.
It also is there to provide a depth perception challenge.
Yes, to
for
create
the
that
deer.
first barrier for the deer that they can perceive.
Trial cameras? It'll be a little invasive, I guess. I would do it.
Teresa Mason again. If you want to do this as a pilot project, you need to come up with a methodology before we approve it. You know, it needs to be quantifiable, it needs to be verifiable, it needs to be accurate, it needs to be a regular monitoring project. It's not something that you just go there every other week or whenever you just happen to be in the area. That's not gonna give you the data you need in order to tell you if this is working or if it's not working. You need a methodology, and I don't see that you can approve a project plan for something like this and as a pilot project without having a detailed methodology of what you're observing, when you're gonna observe it, how you're gonna take the measurements, or whatever quantifiable data that you want, what data you want, right? So I don't think that this is something that we can just say, okay, we're gonna do this as a pilot project and we'll just go out there and occasionally drive by and see what we see. It needs to be, if you want it as a scientific data, it needs to be a method. It has to be a written out methodology that needs to be approved by this board, so that you can take it and apply it somewhere else as needed if that's what you want to proceed with, right? It can't just be, I saw a deer there yesterday on the road. That's not gonna give you the answers that you need.
Can you or Daphne speak to the existing fence and how it's impacting the movement of wildlife and how it's not preventing deer access? Because there's deer all over that property. There's so much evidence.
Right, it's an 8-foot fence at the moment, there's a hedge in front of it, or adjacent to it at the moment, so it's not preventing the deer from going over it. I have been doing field work for 23 years, and I've regularly seen properties that have been fenced off with 8-foot fences and deer all in there. I could get data I could call the police department and see if they have any deer collision data from this area. But that would, I would need to, call them for that. And, I would have to extrapolate that data because I don't know exactly how they have that formulated. But, clearly you saw the deer there. The fence with a hedge in front of it, which prevents depth perception, wasn't working. If a deer needs to go somewhere, they're gonna go. Whether there's multiple fences there, if they're spooked, they're gonna go. Anything else?
Thank you.
I would think that if there's a need for some kind of a report or something, that there's potential for maybe my office to do something a few times a year. I think the board would need to give us some kind of guidance as to how often you would want to know information, and how you would want that reflected, and when you would want that information, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, just based on what is done by the homeowner. The homeowner can be reporting to me directly. I can go out there periodically, based on season or however you would want that information.
Question, legal question. If we, just for sake of argument, let's look at a timetable. We close the hearing tonight, we issue the permit the next meeting, then they have to go before the ZBA and get some stuff, which could take 6 months to a year. We have a 3-year permit, then they gotta get all the permits in order, answer all those questions, and then actually do the construction. Likely they probably won't start with a deer fence, they'll start with a house, I would expect. And the house may take a year or 2 to build, which means they're gonna come back for a renewal of the permit, because it's gonna take so long to get all these permits. I'm just imagining, I don't really know, but I'm imagining.
You're not wrong. The way that things are going these days, it does take a long amount of time.
But the renewals are 1-year renewals. So say we've got 4-year window, and after 3 years, they're starting the deer fence, and by year 4, they've got everything done. That's really the time the clock starts. But our permit then, the application is looking for a CFC, and then we generally don't have any jurisdiction over that property. Can we, as a condition of the permit, require any reporting after the CFC is issued?
I can kind of answer that.
I can speak to this. So currently, the Environment Division has issued an administrative permit for Cow Neck Beach that requires, there's already been a CFC issued, but there is built-in reporting to the Environment Division twice a year on flora and fauna inventory and analysis, and it works, that's how it's been working, and the CFC even contains the condition that, there will be continued reporting for a specified period of time. So there's already a precedent and a mechanism that's happening right now. And because when a conservation board permit is renewed, it's renewed and becomes sort of an administrative permit, right? It becomes WAR, so it's a wetlands administrative renewal. So even after the CFC has been obtained by the applicant, they can still continue to report depending on whatever conditions the board specified in the original permit.
I'm just thinking along the lines of, so what happens if you don't report then? I guess there'd be notice of violation. And then to cure that, you just have to do your reports that you need to do?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how long the board wants the information for it, right? Is it a perpetual reporting requirement, or is it for a period of 5 years so that you can see how the data works and develop your own internal policies for fencing? I mean, again, I go back to the fact that this has a very limited amount of precedential value in terms of other properties that have wetlands such as this.
Teresa Mason again. In the past, where we've had projects that have long-term implications, construction or otherwise, what we often do is issue a partial certificate of wetlands compliance. For the house and the buffer restoration, obviously certain things have to be done before we will sign off on the majority of the construction. But for example, let's say we gave them a permit for a house and a swimming pool, but they didn't do the swimming pool, but they wanted to get their CO. We'll issue a partial certificate of wetlands compliance, and then they can renew the permit, and the permit's still valid for the remaining portion of it. So that's how we've handled other projects. That being said, again, if this is how we want to proceed, we need the methodology, and at some point we have to figure out what the thresholds are, right? If we're getting A, B, and C, and it's clearly not working, does the fence have to come out? Those are implications that need to be included in any monitoring report. You have to set some kind of threshold or something, and then say, okay, well, it's clearly not working, so let's take the fence out. Or, okay, it's working, we leave it and we're done. After a certain period of time, we've got all these monitoring reports, it's working, fine, we're done monitoring, you can keep your fence. Or, we're done monitoring and it's not working, you gotta take it out. So there should be some kind of threshold on that, if this is how we want to proceed.
Thank you. So, I'm thinking that the data will be useful to this board, and I think it's easiest to put the onus on you, Daphne, to present that to us, and you get it from the applicant. For my benefit, an annual reporting is quite sufficient. The things I would like to know are what should be recorded is observance of damaged, of injured deer in the space between the fences, and just a number given to us once a year for the duration of that year is quite sufficient. it's possible there'll be an injured deer that gets in there and didn't get injured on the way in. We'll have to determine that. I think the numbers will probably be quite adequate to show us how to interpret that. The other, thing that I would like to know is how many times in the past year has either of the fences needed to be repaired due to physical injury likely due to deer? And those two numbers are, in my thinking, will satisfy my curiosity on the success of that fence.
For how many years?
You said 5 was typical. I was thinking before you said that, 3 years. I think 3 years is enough.
And that would be 3 years from the installation of the fence, obviously.
3 years from the installation of the fence, which may coincide with the CFC or may not. But you'll know when it's finished, and you can start the clock. And certainly by the time of the CFC, we'll expect a report within a year of that. It doesn't have to be a real complicated report, just numbers. And with also one more piece of flexibility, that there's an opportunity after you fill out the questionnaire, if you have any other comments. If you see something that we can't think of here that we should know, by all means, bring it to our attention.
Well, did you want to know anything about the under part?
You mean if deer are getting through?
Or incidents of, I don't know, small animal problems?
Yeah, I don't know how you're gonna measure that. A 6-inch gap is gonna let all the animals that I see in that area through.
Or if anything comes up, I guess. That would go in additional comments, I guess.
Unless we have a new species arising in the next few years. Then we may have bigger problems.
You never know.
Okay.
Teresa Mason again. I don't think that we should close this hearing without getting at least a basic outline of what we're gonna be monitoring, right? And the frequency of how often these observations are going to be taken. I think before we can proceed, if this is the way you wish to proceed, we need to have at least an outline of what the data we're collecting on record before we proceed. I think that's the best way to protect the board's powers and our liability. I don't think it's a good idea if we close the public hearing without having an outline of any monitoring plan. And, you know, once we have an outline, it can come before the board, they can look at it and say, you know what, I thought of this thing, and we can add it, and we can amend it as we look at it. I don't think it's a good idea to close the hearing without it.
I thought we just did that.
I think we need to have it written in the record for submission and review and approval as part of the record, because you have to approve a monitoring plan, and it should be in, as part of the record, as part of your approval, of what you're approving.
Okay, I thought that would be part of the conditions of the permit.
Right, but as the board itself, right, you want to weigh in on the actual outline and the procedures of the monitoring plan. How frequently you're going out to the site, when are you going out to the site? All of that should be relatively fleshed out, or at least a skeleton of
We're
a
not-
plan
we're not
written
going out-
in the record.
No, we're not going out to the site. the applicant is there and has to repair the fence, so
How-
we want record of that.
How often is it being observed? How often are they going out and doing inspection? That needs to be clear in the record before you vote. I think it's really
Generally,
important to have that
this
done.
applicant has a landscaper that is a continuous observing and has to do continuous repairs or observes it for repairs on a continuing basis.
Right, but let's say, for example, they go out in July, right? But they don't go out in November during the breeding season. That's not gonna give you a complete picture. You know, so that's what I'm saying here. We need a more complete picture of this monitoring plan before the public hearing closes. And that's what I would recommend. If this is how you wanna proceed and you wanna have a monitoring plan, they submit a draft monitoring plan. And it could be as easy as an open, say, yep, we look, open the hearing and say, yep, this is fine, or make this small adjustment and we can close it. But I think for
Well,
the
you-
purpose of doing this pilot project,
Okay, you heard what I said. Are you able to write that as I said it in the permitting process?
again, I think we need to have a timeframe of when the observations are gonna be undertaken, and that should be fleshed out before we do that in the conditional approval.
Yeah. Teresa, I think what Harry was asking for was an annual report, but in that report, whatever happened during the course of the year would be included. So someone would know what happened during a breeding season or happened during another period.
Not necessarily, right? Because landscapers are not as active at properties during the late fall and early winter, right? Because they're not there. They're not there every week mowing the lawn. They're not there pruning the bushes. They're going there every 3 weeks. So it needs to be a little bit more clear. During these months, they're there every week. That's great. During these months, when they're not there every week, they should go once a month
But
or.
they're still going to see it.
Not necessarily, because again, let's
No,
say
no,
in the
no,
middle
that's-
of December, they're
that's
not at the site.
That's not what I'm looking for. That's the wrong interpretation, what I'm saying. Let's assume it's a landscaper who's gonna observe this. I don't know if it's gonna be the landscaper, it could be anybody on their staff. I don't know those people, but there's gonna be somebody who observes damage to the fence, for example, sometime. If it happens in November, they discovered it in March, it's noted then. It doesn't really matter if it's November or March. The point is, are they damaged? Are the deer crashing into it? Are they going through there every week, every 2 weeks, every month, once a year? We don't know those things, but if there is damage that we see on a regular basis, so we can say that at the end of the year, they've had to repair the fence 4 times, that's the information I want to know.
Right, but did they have to repair their fence 4 times, or did a deer pass through that section 8 times because it was unrepaired for 3 months? That's what I'm saying, right?
I'm not interested in that.
So let's say you have a section of fence that is broken, right? Deer can pass through that section, right? And if, or let's say there's like 2 sections. Well, when did the first one occur? When, did it occur 3 months prior? That's why I'm just saying
Yeah,
we should
that's-
have at least a time frame of
Right,
when
and-
these observations are going to
Yeah,
occur,
and
and it
you
should
can
be
write a-
fleshed out a little bit before the hearing is closed.
Yeah, you can write all that stuff up and you can make it very complicated. That's not what I was looking for. You might want to know that, and maybe we should do that, but that's not the information I was looking for. I was looking for how many times a year does the fence need to be repaired? I didn't ask for how many deer are jumping through the fence when it's broken.
But part of this question that we're asking here, right, is this regularly deterring deer, right? And that includes, are there deer being observed on the property? How frequently are they being observed? Is it causing deer collisions immediately adjacent to the site? Those are things that should be fleshed out as part of this monitoring plan. I don't think just having 2 questions is the answer if this is how you want to do a pilot project. I think it needs to be more
Well,
detailed,
need
and
to
I
turn
think
to
it
the
needs to
board.
be.
You want to do something a lot different than what I'm saying, so I'll turn to the board. If you want more information, certainly we can ask for that.
I think a report that says how many times the fence was broken, that tells us that deer are getting in there. And you may have a lot of deer get in, you may not. You might add that they report if they do see deer on the property. And it might not be a result of the fence, it might be because somebody else left a gate open or something. But I could see adding something there. But to make it so cumbersome, you're not gonna have anybody that's going to give us those type of reports. But broken fences, deer that, you know, have been caught or damaged, you know, hurt on the fence, I think that lets us know whether or not it's working. You know, deer being sighted on the property, I think that that would be useful, even though it might not be from the fence.
You know, Teresa's looking for something in writing, you know, a monitoring plan in writing, which can be simple. And I think it would be easy for Daphne to prepare that and have it be contingent upon the issuance of the permit. You know, it could be a couple of pages just describing what, you know, what we're talking about. And it, you know, it could not only include the reporting of the fence repairs, but also a annual or biannual inspection by you or somebody of your nature. To observe, you know, deer activity on the property.
Submitting that information in writing within a period of time, 2 weeks or something.
You know, it's obvious to me that the existing fence is not working and is impeding the movement of small animals throughout the property. It's very evident, because all the animals walk around both the inside and the outside of the existing fence. There's a trail.
Right.
I have videos of 3 groundhogs walking along the side of the fence. There's 2 holes in that fence along the whole perimeter. So I'm confident that the proposed fence is going to improve access. I don't know if it's going to prevent the deer from getting in, but I am confident it'll be better than what's existing.
I don't see that it would be difficult for me or someone comparable to me to do an inspection 2, even 3 times a year, just to observe, you know, from a professional standpoint, so it's not just a potential landscaper, just to see if there is anything evident, you know, just a few times a year. And then, of course, have reporting from the owner's representatives directly to my office, which would be simple. Obviously, with technology, people could just email me, even text me, you know, to say, hey, we had to fix the fence again.
And let's take the question mark out of when it's due. Let's just say it's due on the anniversary of the CFC.
And that'll all be described in the monitoring, when it will be submitted.
Probably one of those inspections, like Teresa said, should be like during the breeding season or whatever the Environment Division might recommend. That's important.
I can certainly put something in writing on letterhead and submit that in, you know, as a condition of the permit, prior to conditional approval.
And then just to confirm, after the 3 years, what happens if the fence is not working? Just so we all know that.
If the fence is not working, it probably doesn't matter what happens, because it's just like there's no fence there.
True.
So it shows that there's no damage, there's no reason for the fence to be there or not to be there.
So they could keep it anyway, but if it's not working, it's not working. If it's not working, then maybe the applicant wants to come back and do something else.
Part of the interpretation of the numbers of deer on the property after the construction happens is that many times the deer access properties that are surrounded by a fence through the driveway area if that's not adequately constrained. And right now, although there's a cattle guard, there's insufficient wire parallel to the, or on the edge of the cattle guard. An 8-foot wire needs to be installed along the edge of the cattle guard for at least 13 or 14 feet.
So our current plan, we're proposing to remove the cattle grates entirely. And just have these fences and the electric gate to the driveway. To the singular driveway instead of the current double.
So the electric gate will be 8 feet tall.
Yes.
Okay. That should be sufficient for the time it's closed.
Yes.
Anything else? Is there anyone on Zoom or in the public who'd like to speak in this application? There being none, is there a motion to close?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Advisory reports for the Planning Board, National Golf Links of America.
Teresa Mason again from the Environment Division. The parcel is located at 129 Sabonic Inlet Road. For those of you unfamiliar with the area, it's near Ram Island. The applicant is proposing to construct a turf barn, which is just located outside of the town's wetland permitting jurisdiction, as it is across a paved road that was paved in prior to 1993. However, it is still within close proximity to the tidal waters of Bullhead Bay, which is a unique embayment, as it contains the westerlymost remnant of once vast eelgrass beds that inhabited the Peconic estuary. The construction plans have, so the planning board needs to be cognizant of potential impacts associated with the turf barn construction on those the seagrass meadows. Based on the review of the site plan, the construction will require excavation of steep slopes in order to recess the barn into the hillside. Neither plan shows proposed grading, so the full impacts of the project cannot be assessed, and the project plan should be revised to provide the grade modifications that are proposed. The architectural plans note that there are access doors on the north and south side of the building, leading to 2 landings, which are also going to be excavated into the hillside. However, the site plan identifies these landings as part of the structure, so that should be made more clear. And that should be revised to be consistent with the architectural plans. The site plan indicates that they're looking to build 3 feet from the proposed limit of clearing. However, there's a question of feasibility if such clearing can be adhered to, as there are several large trees with a DBH of 12 inches immediately at that clearing line. So clarification is needed on how they're intending on doing that. Aerial photographs indicate there are several vehicles being parked in the area of the proposed turf barn. Clarification is needed as to whether or not these vehicles will be stored in the turf barn, and or if additional parking will be required. And that's it.
Motion to send these comments to the planning board?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 16 Indian Avenue LLC.
The parcel is located at 201 Springville Road in Hampton Bays. The survey indicates that most of proposed Lot 2 is heavily wooded. However, a recent site inspection indicated that there are 40 to 50 native trees that were very large and recently cut without the required authorization, thus destroying a key forested watershed land in proximate to Wells Creek. This is particularly concerning in light of recent documented record-breaking average global high temperatures, which appear to be part of climate change. The habitat for native flora, insects, songbirds, and reptiles is also being impacted because of the tree removal. The merits of the former wooded property in terms of maintaining character was also ignored. The damage that was done by removing all of these large trees without the required authorization needs to be countered by requiring significant portions of the parcel be reforested, and that pre-application approval strictly conditions the applicant on coming forward with a revegetation plan. Conservation easements needs to be established once the parcel has been partially revegetated. In order to preserve these areas, creating a minimum 30-foot wide and 20-foot wide area of unfenced reclaimed forested along the westerly property boundaries. This will also provide screening from the existing homes in that area. In the event the recent tree cutting and clearing has encroached onto the adjacent properties, those areas would also need to be reforested. The subdivision map also needs to note that proposed Lot 2 will be equipped with a new IA septic system consistent with health department requirements as well as the town's requirements for new homes in a high priority water quality improvement zone. Just for some perspective, Karina, could you zoom out? Just for some perspective, the wetlands are right across the street there, on the lot right directly across the street. Just so you're aware, even though it's technically outside of the town's wetland permitting jurisdiction. Thank you, Karina.
Is there a motion to send these comments?
Motion to send comments to the planning board?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Conscience Point Shellfish Hatchery.
Uh-oh, I don't know if I have that one. Okay, I don't have that one, unfortunately. So the parcel is located on Conscience Point Road, and it is the parcel that is owned by the Colonial Society. It contains the Conscience Point Rock, which is the approximate location of where the settlers landed here in Southampton town. The hatchery has leased a small portion of the parcel to conduct not-for-profit water quality improvement through shellfish seeding, similar to the Cornell Cooperative SPAT program. What the applicant is seeking to do is to take an existing shed and expand it and convert portions of it to an office. And that would require, because it becomes habitable floor area, it requires that it be connected to a new septic system, which they are proposing to do an IA. That will require abandonment of the current system, which services the other building at the site, and the existing building will also be connected to the IA septic system. Notwithstanding all of that, there is a lot of stuff going on at the property. There's a big asphalt boat ramp, multiple paths cut through the wetlands. Unfortunately, the planning board and the applicant are limited because that area is outside of the leased area.
Is there a motion to send these comments to the planning board?
Motion to send these comments to the planning board?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? For the Board of Trustees, Laureen Andrea.
The property is located at 183 South Country Road. The town had issued a wetlands permit for some construction at the property, inclusive of swimming pool. The applicant is proposing a catwalk and dock, which will traverse the town and state regulated wetlands through a covenanted buffer. A dock and catwalk will be constructed with light penetrable decking with untreated lumber, consistent in a manner consistent with the Conservation Board's requirements. It appears to be routed in a manner to avoid removal of large trees and minimize disturbance to wetlands, and so the planning board, the Conservation Board should have no objection.
Move to send these comments to the trustees.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Gillian Botchelder.
The parcel is located at 61 Inlet Road in Shinnecock Hills. The applicant is proposing a catwalk and dock, which has been routed to take advantage of the former access path within the existing covenanted buffer and wetlands preservation area. It would also be constructed of light penetrable decking and untreated lumber consistent with the Conservation Board's requirements. However, based on a July 10th, 2023 Environment Division inspection, considerable hardscape, ornamental vegetation, patios, driveways, paver walkways, pergolas, and fences have been constructed landward of the covenanted buffer within the town's wetland permitting jurisdiction without the requisite permits, and that would need to be rectified through submission of a wetlands permit application.
We'll just send the comments to the Board of Trustees.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Administrative wetland permits are in your packets. Resolution of conditional approval, A 021097, Dilip Patel and Shaji Dhillon. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Dilip Patel and Sajid Dhillon for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022072, Eric Stajic and Diana Weiss. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Eric Stajic and Diana Weiss for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein pursuant to Chapter 225 of the Code of Village of Sagaponack. All in favor? Opposed? A 023005, Kevin Fitzpatrick and Christina Fitzpatrick. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Kevin Fitzpatrick and Christina Fitzpatrick for the proposed project about the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023014, James Cornwell and Donna Cornwell. Any discussion?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to James Cornwell and Donna Cornwell for the proposed project about the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023019, Brian Farrell as trustees of the Joseph G. Farrell Jr. Irrevocable Children's Trust. Any discussion?
Move to issue.
Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Brian Farrell as trustee for the Joseph G. Farrell Jr. Irrevocable Children's Trust for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023028, Joshua Field and Paula Field. Any discussion?
Move to issue?
Second.
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Brian Farrell, whoops. That has to be amended to Joshua Field and Paula Field for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023032, Jay Schneider and Randy Schneider. Any discussion?
Move to issue? Second?
Resolved that a conditional wetland permit approval be granted to Jay Schneider and Randy Schneider for the proposed project upon the terms and conditions set forth therein. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 02, this is preliminary review, second determination. A 021076, Nicholas Christopher and Penelope Christopher, postponed to July 26th.
Motion to postpone.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022012, Duretti Fufa, postponed to July 26th.
Move to postpone.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022028, Denise Sokolich.
Teresa Mason from the Environment Division. The parcel is located at 102 Cold Spring Point Road in Tuckahoe. The applicant had originally submitted an application in March of last year, and we had done an advisory report dated September 6, 2022, which had recommended project modifications in order to increase the setback from 9 feet to about 27 feet, in order to construct a more linear home versus the project plan that had been originally submitted. The Conservation Board had voted to waive the public hearing at their September 14th, 2022 meeting. However, the applicant afterwards had requested a postponement of review of a vote on a resolution of conditional approval. On June 22nd of this year, the applicant submitted an updated project plan which did scale back the footprint of the home, but only increased the setback of the structures by 3 feet, so a total of 13 feet versus, I think it was 10, 10 previously. Again, based on our review, we are recommending that they modify the project plans to have a more linear home in order to achieve a 25-foot setback, or 25 or 27-foot setback. Doing so would provide for a more functional buffer rather than isolated islands that extend up the property lines. And if they were willing to proceed with such project modifications, we did recommend a public hearing. We did send the applicant our alternative sketch, and I'm not sure if they got back to us. Did they get back to us? No. So at this moment, they haven't gotten back to us, but we are still recommending project modifications and waiving the hearing for that. If they elect to not proceed with project modifications, we would recommend a public hearing, but as of this moment, we are recommending the hearing be waived condition on the project modifications as recommended. And there's a supplementary advisory report dated July 6th in the record.
Is there a motion to waive the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 022082 Erlinda Bildner, postponed to July 26th.
Move to postpone.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023002 28 Bittersweet LLC and 32 Bittersweet LLC.
Teresa Mason again from the Environment Division. The parcels are located at 28 and 32 Bittersweet Lane in Noyak. The applicant is proposing to demolish the existing homes on the parcel as well as the accessory structures, merge the parcel, and and construct a new larger home, swimming pool, pool deck, as well as reconstruct the bulkhead. The proposed action is an unlisted action pursuant to seeker, so you will have to complete an EAF Part 2 and 3 as part of the review of the application, as outlined in the preliminary advisory report dated July 7th. Based on our review of the application, we are recommending minor project modifications. Specifically, we are recommending that the structures be reconfigured and modified in order to achieve a 90-foot setback from the interior brackish wetlands to the north of the site, in order to achieve a 90-foot setback, and then provide for a 75-foot buffer from those wetlands. The proposed 25-foot buffer on the bay side and on the south side of the property is consistent with our requirements, so we have recommended those project modifications, and subject to the waiving of the public hearing.
Motion to waive the public hearing.
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023013 Joel SH LLC.
I'm sorry, that report was not completed, so it's actually it should have been removed from the agenda. Oh,
It's
yeah, so it's postponed till next week.
postponed to July
Motion-
26th.
Motion to postpone to July 22nd.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A 023004 Zanetta Melanowska Stega.
Teresa Mason again from the Environment Division. The parcel is located at 1 Reba Dam Lane in Shinnecock Hills. The application is to reauthorize improvements that were approved pursuant to Conservation Board Wetlands Permit CB 1300111, as well as the modified permit. which had lapsed. And those included legalization and modification of fences, construction of block patios, stone driveway additions, driveway pillars, pergolas, trellises, planters, block walls, and curbing. The permit was conditioned on establishment of a naturally vegetated wetlands preservation area and non-disturbance buffer extending 15 feet from the wetlands. The applicant is also seeking now to legalize the conversion of the accessory building to a dog house slash villa with outdoor ramp and wired dog run. The project plans, again, are consistent with our previous project plans and previous approval. So we are recommending waiving of the public hearing, again, subject to revegetating and restoring the existing covenanted buffer as well as removing any encroachments into the required buffer.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A023022. Guillaume Sivadier, postponed to July 26th.
Motion postponed?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A023027. Robert Crabb.
The parcel is located at 9 East Shore Drive in North Sea. The applicant is seeking reapproval of residential redevelopment plans which were previously conditionally approved pursuant to Wetlands Permit Application A180363, inclusive of demolition and reconstruction of the existing, demolition of the existing building and accessory structures, and then construction of a new FEMA-compliant two-story dwelling with balconies, rooftop terrace, rooftop swimming pool, pervious drive, walkways. The applicant is also proposing to install a new IA septic system, which had been previously approved, but the location and configuration has been modified, as well as to establish the required covenanted wetlands preservation area and non-disturbance buffer, along with native landscaping. The project plans are consistent with our previous approvals, so we are recommending waiving of the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion to waive the public hearing?
Second.
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby waives the public hearing requirement pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-80 of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? A023035. Anthony Prudenti.
The parcel is located at 20 East Tiana Road in Hampton Bays. The applicant is seeking to demolish the existing asphalt driveway, concrete walkways, relocate an existing shed, partially demolish the existing structure, and construct 1- and 2-story residential additions, inclusive of an attached garage, porches, and to put a roof over a existing deck, which will be resurfaced. They are also seeking to construct an elevated retaining wall, an elevated swimming pool within an area of depth fill, which would be contained by retaining walls. We had recommended waiving of the public hearing, subject to elimination of the fill deposition and retaining walls by structurally elevating the swimming pool and the associated patio and/or decking. The applicant would prefer to go to a public hearing on that application.
Motion to schedule a public hearing for August 23rd?
Second?
Resolved that the Town Conservation Board hereby schedules the public hearing for August 23rd, 2023, and the notice of public hearing be published in the town designated newspaper pursuant to Chapter 325, Section 325-8C of the Town Code. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all.